Do you think you're ready for the deadlift? Stick around, I got my 5 prereqs that every client must pass before they deadlift. Alright, prereq number 1, right? Fixing length-tension relationship. So what does length-tension relationships even mean? Alright, in reality, it's just a fancy way of saying fixing posture. We know that every joint in the body has a specific range of motion that it's supposed to hit. So for example, we know that shoulder flexion, right, should be 180 degrees overhead, or shoulder internal rotation should be 70, and external rotation should be 90 degrees, right? Each joint has a specific range of motion it needs to hit, and therefore the muscles that control that joint, okay, need to allow this process to happen. So why is it important to have good posture? Well, if you don't have good posture, I can really tell you 2 things. And the first thing is that you'll always be at risk of injury, right? So let's just look at a common example. If you have a muscle that's strong, shortened, that's over-facilitated, all right, what that's going to do is that's going to restrict your range of motion at that joint. If you restrict that range of motion, you're going to lack blood supply, you're going to lack the ability to recover, okay? And then, of course, that will put you at risk of injury. We'll take the other side of the story. If you have a muscle that's weak, long, and under-facilitated, well, once again, you're still going to be at risk of injury because you have a joint that has an excessive range of motion and now has joint laxity. The second thing I can tell you is that you'll never be able to reach your full potential, right? Whether that's in the gym or on the athletic field or whatever it is, right? You're always going to have muscles that are creating compensations, right? Muscles that are doing jobs that are not their job to do, okay? And therefore you'll never be able to reach your full potential when it comes to performance. So how do you fix length-tension relationships? Well, it takes a pretty skilled coach, right? You need a coach that can perform a full body assessment where you get the measurements of every joint, or at least every primary joint in the body, and you determine, okay, where they're restricted and where they're having an excessive range of motion. And then you need to create a routine, right? A routine where you stretch the tight muscles and at the same time you facilitate or you strengthen the long and weak muscles. All right, this helps bring the body back into balance, and it sets you up for success when you enter your weight training program. All right, prereq number 2 is understanding how to perform belly breathing. Okay, why is this important? If you do not know how to belly breathe, or therefore you do not know how to utilize your diaphragm for breathing, it would be impossible to create intra-abdominal pressure. So it's the first part, okay, into creating intra-abdominal pressure. All right, your diaphragm is your primary respiratory muscle. We have secondary respiratory muscles, such as your scalene muscles, your sternocleidomastoid, your levator scap, your pec minor. All these muscles are secondary when you don't use your diaphragm. So for example, these muscles will activate to pull the rib cage up to help increase inspiration. All right, but it's very important to use your diaphragm, which we're going to show you now. Okay, let's take a quick look at a diagram so you can kind of see the musculature. In blue is what is your diaphragm, right? So it has attachment points such as the rib cage, as well as your thoracic and your lumbar vertebra, the actual bodies of the vertebra. The rest of this musculature is actually what you can consider to be your secondary respiratory muscles, right? So you have your pec minor, and you have your serratus anterior, and you have your sternocleidomastoid, and some of the other muscles which aren't shown, like your scalenes and your levator scap, right? These are all secondary respiratory muscles, okay? And they get used when your primary diaphragm, right, is not working, right? If you can look at the diaphragm, look when it contracts, and you'll notice that the rib cage will expand and that the diaphragm actually, right, depresses down, right? It moves down. So you can actually notice this on somebody when they're breathing, right? Because when they're activating their diaphragm, what's going to happen is that they're going to push all their internal viscera, right? All their internal organs will press down and out, and you'll actually see the belly expand, right? Your umbilicus will actually move away from the spine, all right? And this is how you can determine if someone is belly breathing or chest breathing. All right, prereq number 3 is learning how to activate and strengthen your transversus abdominis, right? This is the deepest part of your core musculature, and it's vital. It's really the second part to creating intra-abdominal pressure. let's take a look at this diagram, all right, so that we can see the musculature. All right, right here, as you can see, is your transversus abdominis. Okay, what's important to know is that it's also your body's primary spinal decompressor, as well as known as your corset muscle. If we look in the back, which is important, it attaches into your thoracolumbar fascia right here. Okay, and this fascia is vital for creating stability at the lumbar spine. Right, when your transversus abdominis contracts, it pulls this muscle, right, increasing the natural stability that's there. Okay, it also has attachment points into your ilium or your pelvis, the inguinal ligament down here, and then of course right into the center where all your abdominal musculature attaches into, right, your linea alba, or that white line. Without your transversus abdominis activating, right, you're missing out on 36 or up to 36% of spinal decompression. All right, so I'm going to show you how to test for the strength of your transversus abdominis. All right, this is my guest Tanita. She's going to be demonstrating for us today. What you're going to need is a blood pressure cuff. This will simply measure the pressure that your transversus abdominis is now taking off the blood pressure cuff. Okay, so this technique was developed by Paul Chek at the Chek Institute. All right, if you want to learn more about it, visit his website. For now, Tanita has the blood pressure cuff right underneath her belly button, and it's going to get blown up to 40 millimeters of mercury. Okay, from here, Tanita lies flat, okay, and she's going to she's really going to activate her transversus abdominis. And when she does that, she's pulling her belly away from the blood pressure cuff, decreasing the amount of pressure. Okay, we have Tanita laying here as flat as she can. The blood pressure cuff is right underneath her belly button, and we have blown it up to, as you can see, 40 millimeters of mercury. All right, she's going to activate her transversus abdominis, right, pulling her belly button away from the floor and closer to the spine. Go ahead, T. Good. As you can see, it went down to around 28 to 30, right, millimeters of mercury. So according to the Chek Institute, right, your goal is to decompress it by 10 millimeters of mercury. This would represent optimal, or represent really 100% strength in your transversus abdominis. So let's take an example. If Tanita was only able to decompress it to 35, meaning she was missing 5, she would be missing 50% of her optimal transversus abdominis strength. So another thing that you're looking for, right, is compensation in the body. Okay, your transversus abdominis is not a flexor. It's actually the only core musculature that doesn't create flexion in the body. So when you're watching Tanita go, if we look at another example, we're hoping to see no compensations. Okay, so if we watch Tanita just perform a couple more reps, as she activates her transversus abdominis, we're going to hopefully see no compensations. And some of them could be, right, flexion at the hip, so she can try to flex her hip to get her belly button higher, or she could round the shoulders, like she can protract her shoulders into the ground to get her belly button higher, or she could flex at the abdominal muscles, right? All your other abdominals are flexors of the spine. What we're really looking for here is complete isolation of your transversus abdominis. All right, so if your client didn't have optimal transversus abdominis strength, this is something that we have to strengthen before we, right, start moving into the deadlift. All right, so this is an exercise called tummy vacuums, and the goal is to strengthen the transversus abdominis. It's going to incorporate both belly breathing and activation of the transversus abdominis, right? So Tanita is on all fours, right, and she has a dowel rod, right, across the body. The dowel rod is there so that you can measure a neutral spine. Okay, while she's doing the breathing exercises, we're looking to see, once again, if she compensates, right? If she starts activating her flexors and not her transversus abdominis. The first thing that Tanita is going to do, right, is that she's going to inhale. When she inhales, her stomach should fall, right? This, once again, represents belly breathing. So if she inhales, her stomach should fall towards the ground. You should feel for it. Okay, the next thing she's going to do is activate her transversus abdominis and pull up. So now you're decreasing the distance between the belly button and the dowel rod. It got closer together. And she's going to hold this for at least 10 seconds. Good. So from here, she's going to repeat the process. She's going to inhale. The stomach should fall. Right? And then she's going to activate her transversus abdominis and pull up. And she's going to hold for 10 seconds. Right? You can perform this for about 10 reps. All right, prereq number 4, okay? It's taking what we've learned already, okay? The ability to belly breathe, all right? The ability to activate your transversus abdominis. Okay, now we can create intra-abdominal pressure. All right, so how does it work? Okay, when you belly breathe, we've talked about this, all the organs get pushed down and out. Okay, when you then activate your transversus abdominis, all right, all those organs get compressed in, okay, which gives it nowhere to go but up and down. All right, I want you to think about almost squeezing a full tube of toothpaste, right? Everything gets pressed up into the diaphragm or down into the pelvic floor. Okay, your diaphragm, we've already talked about this, has an attachment point onto L2 and L3, right? The vertebra, which sit directly above clearly L4 and L5. Okay, when those organs get squeezed and pressed up, it pushes the diaphragm up, therefore indirectly it presses the L2 and L3 vertebra up. It decompresses your own spine. All right, last but not least, we got prereq number 5, okay? And what I think is important is building a base strength in your erector spinae muscles before you move into the deadlift. Okay, so what we're gonna talk about is the difference between tonic and phasic muscles. All right, this is a pretty big topic, so we're just gonna give a little bit of detail into it. The body has both tonic and phasic muscles. Tonic meaning majority type 1 muscle fibers. It's used more in stabilization and they're not really fatigable, right? So for example, your lumbar erectors is a tonic muscle. Your iliopsoas is a tonic muscle. Your bicep brachii, your pec minor, these are all tonic muscles. They need to be able to produce work for a longer period of time. And then you also have phasic muscles, and these are our prime movers, right? Majority type 2 muscle fibers, they're there to move the body fast and explosively. So some of these muscles could be your pectoralis major, your quadriceps, your tricep muscles. So as we just said, right, your lumbar erectors are tonic muscles. They need to be able to produce work for a long period of time, right, in a stabilizing fashion. So if we actually look at the deadlift, right, one of the most important aspects, which we'll talk about later, is lifting with a neutral spine, right? So what does that mean? That means that your lumbar erectors are pretty much in an isometric contraction. There's very little shortening and lengthening of these muscles. They're actually in a constant contraction, holding that spine in its perfect position. If you look at some of the other muscles, like your gluteus maximus or the hamstring muscles or even the quadriceps, these muscles are actually producing the majority of shortening and lengthening, right? They're actually changing length. They're actually more of an eccentric and concentric contraction phase. So before I have my clients deadlift, it's important that they have a base strength, all right, in their lumbar erector muscles. All right, and what I use to test that is the prone cobra. So we have Tanita in the prone position. Okay, she's gonna extend up. Good, and she's extending both at her lumbar spine as well as her glutes and her hamstring muscles. All right, and she's gonna try to hold this for 2 minutes. So the reason for 2 minutes is simple, right? We know that when a muscle's able to produce submaximal work for at least 120 seconds, right, 2 minutes, right, that it has optimal, right, stabilizing strength. So this is important for the lumbar erectors because this is the same kind of suboptimal work that they're going to have to produce in the deadlift, right? As we talked about during the deadlift, those erector spinae muscles are really in an isometric state, okay? And this exercise, right, the prone cobra is something that prepares them for the deadlift, okay? But you don't want that spine flexing and extending under load. All right, so those are our 5 prereqs, all right? Just to sum it up, number 1, all right, fix length tension relationships. You can do that with a stretching and facilitating routine. All right, number 2 is learn how to belly breathe. Okay, number 3 is strengthen the transversus abdominis. Number 4 is take these 2 things and be able to create intra-abdominal pressure so you can decompress your own spine while you're lifting. All right, and number 5 is build up, all right, a base strength, okay, so that you can decrease the chances of you flexing and extending under load. All right, that's all we have for today. Stick around. All right, next week we got part 3 where I actually teach you, all right, the deadlift and the setup. All right, thanks for joining. You're one step closer to learning how to thrive. Peace.